Do you want your business to grow faster? Are you open to new and out-of-the-box ways to drive revenues and increase value? How do you imagine the most successful entrepreneurs and business leaders double, triple, or expand their businesses tenfold or more? The answer is deals. This is a weekly podcast featuring conversations with business owners, executives, and leaders as we reveal behind-the-scenes details that give you, our listeners, the confidence to pursue your own deal-driven growth. On this show, we discuss a huge variety of deals, everything from large, complex mergers and acquisitions, capital raising, joint ventures, strategic alliances, real estate, affiliate and sponsorship deals, franchising, and more. My name is Kupfer, and I've been supporting deal-driven growth for businesses for over 35 years as a successful entrepreneur, professional negotiator, and attorney. My goal is to help you strategize, plan for, find, and complete deals that will help your company grow faster. Welcome to the Deal Quest podcast. Let's get started. John Martinka is known as the escape artist because of the work he does in three areas. One, creating lucrative exits for small businesses so the owner can exit with style, grace, and more money. Two, helping executives escape the corporate world by buying the right businesses the right way. Three, dramatically increasing the value of companies via growth by acquisition. I love that, the escape artist. He has over 25 years of experience as an intermediary and well over 150 clients successfully navigate the treacherous waters of buy-sell transactions. He was awarded board approval in business acquisitions and sales by the Society of Advancement of Consulting, LLC. He currently serves on 2 nonprofit boards and is very active with the Bellevue Breakfast Rotary Club. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Corey. I appreciate it.
So, John, listen, obviously, there's no question why you're on this podcast with all the experience you have in terms of buy-side, sell-side, helping people create value. We're going to talk about the books that you have. But before we get into all that, I want to take you back to when you were a little kid growing up, maybe 8, 10, 12 years old. What did you want to be? Because I'm guessing an M&A professional was not it back then, but you tell me.
No, I don't think I knew what an M&A professional was till many, many years later. So I think it was the usual stuff of little boys back then was fireman, policeman, maybe a cowboy, but all after being a baseball or football player.
Yeah. Very, very, very classic. In fact, before we were on the air, we were talking about being baseball fans, and we're recording this the day that Bob Uecker passed away, and we were reminiscing a little bit about.
Yep.
So, John, my one other question looking back before we jump into, what you're doing now and your experience and your history and, what you teach people and what you work with people on is, what was your first deal? It could be some of any type, maybe when you're younger, maybe early in your career. What was your first deal of any type?
First deal. Well, it wasn't a buy-sell deal. So I would say, could go into one of 2 different forks in the road. When I was in college, a friend and I said, we are sick of working summer jobs for someone else. And we started a painting company.
Yeah.
And he was really handy. And I was almost as handy. And my dad was super handy. So I came by it naturally. And we did really good work. So I would say the first deal was whomever we got to hire us for that first painting job, running ads in the suburban papers, college kids painting was probably the first one. But then my first real job out of college in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, was with the local concert promoter. Worked there for quite a few years. And so I would say in that case, it would have been the first time I booked an act and handled the whole thing.
Love it. One of the things that I loved in college was I was on the concert committee, which was a student committee that helped book acts at the school. And, it was I went to college in the late 70s, early 80s, and we had some, phenomenal, classic acts at school. And it was interesting because it was well before, I was in college, law school, but I got to see the contracts that these musical acts sign. And one of the things that disillusioned me a little bit was I saw that, although some of them would go off script, but I saw that one of the things that was in the contract was, for a lot of these bands, was how many encores they were going to do.
And the long list of what goes in the dressing room.
Exactly. The classic green M&Ms, whatever it is.
That was Van Halen, and we did them many times. And after the first couple of times, we just said, forget it. We're not taking whatever color M&Ms they don't want out, and nothing happened.
I love it. So tell me, how did you get into the M&A space in the first place?
Serendipity. I was in a small Rotary Club before the one I'm in now, and the guy who was I was president, a young guy being president. The guy who was president before me is a little older, but we're both younger than most of the other members who had started this new club. And we got along, all those board meetings, and one day he said something along the lines of, "I've always thought you'd be good in this business." And the timing was right, just like everything in life. Timing's got to be right. He knew I liked but didn't love what I was doing, and it's worked out. It's been great. And now I have my daughter working with me, one of my daughters working with me for the last half dozen or so years, and that's been fun too.
Love it. What professional business were you in prior to moving over to this?
I was in sales, except for a couple of different things immediately previously. And I'm really good at selling myself. I wasn't all that enthused about selling someone else's stuff, which is usually the opposite, as you know, as being a lawyer, that there are so many people who are so talented. And, maybe if they're selling someone else's product and it's not their name, they can do it. But once they're the one that also has to back up what they're selling because it's them, it's tough.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a good distinction. You're right. Some people really have trouble the other way. They say, "Oh, I can sell something else, but I can't sell myself." Love it. So listen, I love the way you sort of brand yourself. These scape artists. That's a lot of fun. And I know you have a couple of books out, so tell us a little bit about the books you got.
Well, I actually have 5 books.
Mm-hmm.
So the most recent one is called Exit with Style, Grace, and More Money, which is actually a term we with my daughter now through the company trademarked, or M&A, that term. And that book just came out 3 or 4 months ago. My first book is called Buying a Business That Makes You Rich. It's aimed at the corporate executive who says, "I'm sick of the corporate world," or "the corporate world's sick of me."
Yep.
And I want to take control. And I think, it's the person who's got some money, got skills. It's not looking to buy a deli or a dry cleaner or anything like that. They're looking for a good, solid, small, mid-sized, lower middle market business. I guess it would be a prelude to the Exit with Style, Grace, and More Money book on getting a company prepared for sale. Is titled, "If They Can Sell Pet Rocks, Why Can't You Sell Your Business for What You Want?" And it goes through all the things, the value drivers that most business owners don't pay attention to, et cetera. And then company growth by acquisition makes dollars and cents, with cents being SENSE. And then a little book of 60 or so, mostly 2-page, left and right side essays on deal tips. I wrote 50 of them. I had some other deal professionals, I think 10 or 12 of them, write a short chapter. And so it's one of those books where you can pick it up in the middle or pick it up at the end or pick it up at the beginning. It doesn't matter. They're just all standalone tips.
I love it. So listen, I'm going to want to get to the value drivers, but before we go there, I want to ask a couple of follow-ups on these various books. So you talked about the first book being mainly directed towards corporate execs and people who might want to get out of the corporate world and buy a business. What did you find? Because, obviously, we deal with a number of folks like that, and we've had people on that focus on, like Bruce Marks was on. There's a lot of funding for searchers, like the folks like that coming out of corporate, coming out of military, who want to buy businesses on the lower middle market kind of area generally. And it's interesting. First of all, it goes against the myth, which is a myth that it's that startups are always the college dropout or never went to college tech kid, right? Statistics don't show that that's starting most of the businesses. But also, it is a shift coming out of corporate, right, and becoming an entrepreneur. And I'm just curious as to what you've seen on who makes the best business buyers who come out of that, and who are the ones that maybe have trouble because being an executive or a person in a corporate culture is very different than running a business.
Yeah, you're right. And I think if you look at some big picture things, I like to say that we're talking businesses that are valued up to about generally 10 million.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're running into, the small private equity to small family offices, or to larger groups like that, or strategics, a little more. So if it's an individual and they've been the president of something, the vice president of something, and they've done real well, being able to manage to some varying degree people, processes, money, and enthusiasm. It is a relationship game with your employees. It's a relationship game between buyer and seller.
Yeah.
No one with a business that size, or almost no one, will sell to somebody they don't like. And you probably see the same thing I do, Corey. I'll say 80, but it's probably 90% of owners are really concerned with who they sell to. Will they take care of their people? Will the legacy continue, the name on the business, all of that? And often it's as important as every last dollar, maybe even more so.
Yeah. So when that corporate buyer, refugee buyer comes in, delve in a little more. Like, what are the characteristics of those folks that are successful? How do they? What do they have to do to make that transition, right? To running because listen, I came out of big law and started my own law firm, right? I didn't buy a law firm, but I started my own law firm, and I'll tell you what. I mean, it was this was many years and decades ago, but it was a big transition. There was nobody who bought supplies for me anymore. Now this is different when you buy a business. It's obviously got team and it's got whatever, but still there's a mentality shift, right? Especially coming from a bigger company that has much bigger budgets and things like that. Any other thoughts on how people make that transition?
Yeah, the people who get so focused on what they're good at and ignore the rest of the business. I'm really a good salesperson. I'm just going to sell. Yeah. And they don't watch their margins, and they don't watch what other people are doing to their margins or operations, or someone who's so into the numbers that they don't think about the relationship with the customers or even their employees. So they get focused. They get in a silo. Yeah. A small business like that, if it's, whether I don't care what it's worth, a couple million, 10 million, whatever, 20 million, you got to be, whatever cliche, jack of all trades, wear many hats, because you have to know what's going on to some degree in all these areas.
Yeah, and it's so much easier in a big corporate environment to be just in a particular lane. That's a great point. So I want to delve a little bit more into this exit with style, grace, and more money. Like, talk to me a little bit about what had you, I mean, listen, I love the concept, but, what had you focus on that, make it, the name of your book, your latest book, and what does that really mean in the reality of the deal world?
Yeah, well, the title came from, just evolved into its present form through a talk I would give on exiting. And it really comes to, for the owner, what do you want to get out of it? And they again, we talked about legacy. So they want to leave with some style. They want to leave with grace. They want to leave with their people taken care of. And of course, more money. So what do you have to do to get that? Because it's not just grow. I mean, you can take a $5 million business, and if you're making 10% and grow it to 10 million and make 10%, yeah, you're going to get more money. But if you grow it from 5 million to 10 million and you're making 15%, because you've improved productivity and margins and used technology and any and other things, you've not only increased your profit, and therefore, if it's a multiple of that profit, you've increased the multiple.
Right. So let's talk about what some of those specific value drivers are, right? Because, listen, people understand the math, right? Conceptually, they say, oh, yeah, okay, I got it. If I increase my EBITDA or whatever the multiple is going to be based upon, the base is higher. I understand there's also breakpoints where the multiple gets higher. Okay, I understand that math. And people might say, oh, I'm going to go out and sell more. I'm going to go out whatever. But yeah, it's much more complex, and there are more levers than just bringing in more business. So how do people increase that enterprise value?
Well, I like to talk about seven, I call them 7 key factors to increase value. I've heard talks where people say there's 8 or 12. I mean, you could find lists on the internet of 20-something.
Right.
But people can't remember 20-something. So 7's a good number, lucky 7, right? I'm going to start out with one, and really, depending on the company, they could be in any order. Having really good financial systems and therefore accurate financial statements.
Yes.
So I'm having lunch next week with a couple CPAs. I've known the firm a long time. It's a new managing partner. And she sent me an email and said, I want to talk to you about this client and this client. And in both cases, she said, their books are a mess. We're working with them on it. And too often, the accounting department is I call it Cinderella, the weak little stepsister off in the corner. It has to be done, so someone's got to do it. But I want to play with the product. I want to sell, work with the customers, et cetera, et cetera. And then you get the statements, and they're a mess. I mean, we're looking through some for a client right now. They're 2024s. And there's lots of questions on what's going on. And they don't pay attention to accounting rules. Now, like over the last few years, leases have to be capitalized. They have to go on the You're leasing a copier, a car, the space. I'm in the company, for-profit company I'm on the board of. I see their statements and they're to that level, but you see so many small businesses. And this particular company, I know they have two pieces of machinery that are on a lease with one of, the typical $1 buyout at the end of the lease. Nowhere are they to be seen. And you just got to treat your financial systems with respect, because the buyers are going to pick apart the financial statements as much or more than anything. You know that.
Yeah, no question. And listen, folks, that can, cause two things. One, it's almost like at best, if you're a mess, it's going to cause a reduction in, the due diligence, financially, is going to be done. And they're going to say, well, you characterize this wrong, or this is not in there, whatever. And they're going to reduce your purchase price. Or even worse, it could often kill deals, because I often talk, the issues with due diligence people is they're always worried about, where there's smoke, there's fire. They're worried about what they don't know, what they can find. And if they find some stuff that gets them worried, they're worried there's other stuff, and that can kill deals.
Yeah, and there's these days the buzzword in accounting is quality of earnings report.
Yes.
And it's, I'll give the accounting industry credit. They've done a good job of marketing something. It's a catchy name, love the name. Of course you want quality earnings. It used to be many years ago, you might have called it a little audit or, comprehensive review or whatever, but it's good at varying degrees. And there are different levels of them, of course, based on the size of the deal. And they're looking for things that are outliers, that don't make sense. You get in these companies and they think that the business checkbook is an extension of their personal checkbook, and they can't understand why everyone wonders what they're really doing.
Love it. All right, so it's 1 of 7. What else do we have?
Well, let's talk about the owners, and it comes down to owner dependency.
Yeah.
There's too many of them. So I like to share the story about it. Close to a year ago, I went to an industry event, and it was a couple people talking. The main speaker on the panel was a guy who he and his partners had recently sold their business for $70 million. Is one of the things I wrote down that stuck with me is he said, we realized as we were going through the diligence process that we were way too important to the day-to-day operations of the business.
Yeah.
Company sold for $70 million. And they were doing things way below their pay grade.
Yep.
And in one way, buyers like that, because they say, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
I'll hire someone for X thousands of dollars a year. They'll do that work and I'll go work on more important things. But others are going to look at it and say, I don't know how to do those things. Does anyone else know how to do those things? Why isn't there a management team for that? Doesn't he or she delegate? And delegating's tough. Delegating is really tough.
It's crucial. I mean, listen, this is like fundamental classic advice, right? Build this, Michael Gerber, email, all the company again run without you. And despite the fact that it's been talked about a lot, books have been written on it, any kind of advisor is whether it's an M&A advisor, whether it's, people who do like EOS facilitation, all these business, processing systems, whatever, folks like me are going to tell you that. For some people, it's really, really hard to implement and let go.
Yeah, it's not just business owners, though. And I was recently talking to a friend, and she's a banker, and she is doing way too much. And I said, you are like the owner and founder where you're doing everything. And I said, you've built your own silo, and you're the only one in your silo. And you need to start getting other people in the bank to do these things that will free up your time to do what you do best.
Yes.
And a lot of it was just screening the initial communications of all these, all these people who say, I want a loan to buy a business. And, as she told me, the vast, vast majority of them are just, no, we're not interested in you based on your experience, your lack of money, this or that. But you shouldn't be taking those calls.
Yeah, no, totally. All right. We don't necessarily have to go through all 7, but is there 1 or 2 more you want to highlight?
I would say a big one is be able to hire and retain great people. People are a business's number one asset. And guess what? They don't show up on the balance sheet, but they're there and they are the most important. And when you can retain them and you can hire well for good people, but then keep them growing, Good employees want to grow. I can't remember who it was originally said it, but it's the A people hire A people, B people hire C people because they want someone not as good as them. In business, you want to have people. You want the sales manager who says, I want my salespeople making more money than me. I want great people. And, it's not easy because they need advancement. And you get an owner, and I don't care if they're doing 5, 10, 50 million in sales, they get to a point where they're really comfortable and they coast. And when employees are coasting, then they get bored and they get burned out and they say, I want something else. And all that experience can walk out the door.
And one of the trends that I've talked about recently that we've seen, and it happens from time to time, but certainly, anytime there's a tighter job market especially for skilled folks, sometimes just talent acquisition it becomes the bigger driver of deal flow. Like buyers are looking to buy less for other reasons that they might geographical expansion, just scale to be able to exit higher multiples, getting at certain industries. I'm not saying all those true things don't also come into play, but the hiring to acquire, acquiring to bring in talent, we've seen has ticked up again as a driver for M&A. I don't know if you've seen the same thing.
Yeah, and the article in the Wall Street Journal yesterday, the day before we're recording this, was on, power has shifted back to the bosses.
Yeah.
And, if we talk about all this, but retaining good people, HR is a big part. Too many small businesses, even mid-sized businesses, tend to ignore the HR. My wife, my aunt, my daughter, my sister-in-law, brother-in-law, whatever, does the HR while they do other stuff. And, where all of us are, but especially, you're in California and New York, and I'm in Washington, and the little HR rules, the minutia stuff is overwhelming. And a lot of these companies I know they're not in compliance. And there could be a problem in a lawsuit waiting to happen. We just saw a company and no policies and procedure manual. And the owner says, well, we haven't had any problems.
Yeah. Love it.
Let me throw another one in. You probably don't hear it from others. I call it the 3 I's. First of all, IP. If you got IP, protect it. We talked about, I've trademarked The Escape Artist. I've trademarked Exit Restyle, Grace and More Money. I've trademarked creating a large exit for small business, for small businesses. Patents, all of that. Protect it. Don't leave it out there. Renew it when it needs renewing.
Yep.
Copyrights are quite to that level, but whatever you do needs to be protected. And then the second I is IT. Talk about, exploding industry of protecting IT, managing it. We were a company I'd worked with on a number of projects, and we were going to sell to a player in their industry. And in the middle of it, and we had a deal. We were working on a deal where, it was going to go through, good price, good terms. The company's managed service provider got hacked. All their customers' information got stolen. My client happens to deal with sensitive information like financial information for their customers. They got hacked, big mess, cost them about $500,000.
Yeah.
Fixing it and all the fines for having that information released, even though they did nothing wrong.
Yeah.
Except hired a wrong MSP.
Right.
And then the third one is incentives. And we talk about people and keeping people. So I talk about my friend George. George owns 6 or 7 companies, but the second one he bought, he had a partner on that one. They went in. When I helped them look at the company, noticed these people working there don't get paid very much.
Yeah.
The owner was into how much money can I make? George went in, created a new comp plan with bonuses and incentives. People started making more money, the incentive to make a lot more money. And guess what? He grew the company 75% the first year. So it's like, the friend of mine had talked about one of his clients. It's the same. He's a CFO. He talks about this client the same way this owner of the business that sold to George would be. He said he will trip over dollars to save a dime.
Well, and I'll tell you, from a buyer point of view, one of the things that good buyers do is they identify, gaps where they can come in and change things or bring, their special sauce, or even if it's not so special, sometimes it's very basic, like, oh, wait, we incentivize these employees a little better, they're going to bring in more business or service clients better or whatever it is. And sometimes, especially with companies that have been around for a while, there's so much low-hanging fruit that could really create so much more profitability from when a buyer comes in.
Yeah, in this case, George paid a little over a 6 multiple of earnings. Most people would have said, "Oh, don't pay more than 5 for that business." At the end of 1 year, technically he was at a 4 multiple.
Yeah, love it.
So there's lots of things that owners can do, should do, if they step back and try to see the big picture.
Yeah, love it.
And listen to others.
Yeah. Let's take a break from the show for a minute so I can tell you about an incredible resource my team and I have put together for you. Secrets of Deal-Driven Growth, Creative Ways to Grow Your Business Even in Challenging Times, is a powerful ebook that helps you take DealQuest podcast episodes and apply them to your own life and business. This is the ideal tool for anyone looking for creative ways to grow as deal makers, and you can get yours now. It's as easy as heading to corykupfer.com/workbook and downloading your copy. While you're there, you can also consider joining our dynamic deal-driven community of founders, experts, small business owners, and entrepreneurs. Now back to the show. So talk to me a little bit about, you talk a little bit about size, but are there any particular industries or geography or things like that, where you focus? Talk a little bit more about who you help.
Industries, we're pretty agnostic, although we don't do medical, dental, stuff like that. Those kind of things. We really stay away from restaurants.
Yeah.
I have someone I refer restaurants to, and every time I do, he says, "I don't know why these people want to own a restaurant, but there's a lot of buyers out there for them."
Tough business. I've had some clients.
Tough business.
Hard business.
Geographically, no. We've had clients in at least 15 states. I used to wonder, why would someone down the street from me work with someone across the country? Well, it may have been true 10 years ago, 5 years ago, but technology today is when so many meetings are like on Zoom or Teams that it isn't as big a deal.
Yeah.
And so we're pretty open geographically. Our side, we're low middle market. We don't want to work with the delis and the dry cleaners. We don't want to work with what the true investment bankers work with.
We talked a little bit about hiring, or finding key talent, being a driver for deals. Any other trends that you're seeing? I mean, obviously, listen, we've got a lot of change of movement going on, whether it's, inflation coming down, whether it's rates easing down, but questions on that, whether it's new administration coming in. I'm not talking about getting into politics, but obviously different policy changes could impact deals. And what are your thoughts in terms of either existing trends or what you think might be happening in 2025?
Well, yeah, I'm reading mixed things about the private equity world, and one of them is because of interest rates. It hasn't affected the smaller deals as much because they're not leveraging as much.
Yeah.
We had a deal, as a lawyer, you probably like this. It was a private equity-backed group. They were doing a roll-up.
Yep.
And, this was a $15 million deal with almost all of it cash at closing. And I recall, this was only 3 months ago, but as I recall, I don't think there was any equity put in. They were borrowing everything. And it was a pretty good-sized private equity group backing it. And, they were real open. We're going to do this for another bunch of years, and then we're going to flip this thing.
Yeah.
And this particular seller, in one way, he cared. He gave his management team a very nice bonus, not at the sale, but for staying for a year.
Sure.
He told them, "This is what you're getting, but you better be here for that year." I think it was a year. Could have been 18 months, but you better be here. And he's at the age where he probably won't be working then or very much. Some owners will say, especially a client we have now, he says, "I don't want to sell to someone who's going to flip it."
Well, listen, people have to understand when they get it, roll-up situations are different, right? I mean, most of these roll-ups, that's the whole intention, right? Is to roll it up and flip it. And listen, I've been doing these deals since the 80s, and, it's really interesting because, and I've had, when I say doing them, I was involved with, in some of them on creating them on the buy side. I've also done them plenty on the sell side. And one of the key things is because I think a fundamental distinction is that there are some that are just aggregating for size, and they're betting that they're going to be able to exit this thing at a multiple arbitrage in time before there's any event that could cause a problem, right? Others are actually adding value. right, over time. And if you're really adding value over time and efficiencies and things like that, then it's a much safer bet, right? Because if the market does go bad, right, interest rates do go up, the economy goes down, whatever it is, then you're not underwater. You can actually hold and run the thing and make more profit on it if you're adding value beyond just aggregating for size and having capital and speed to market to be able to flip this thing on a multiple arbitrage. So I've seen them work and I've seen them blow up depending upon what their philosophy is.
Well, what deal I just talked about, which they were doing really a growth by acquisition, and not only did they pick up I should say it was a manufacturer's rep for a really good size one. They picked up new manufacturers, new customers, people, of course, people, but they also picked up, and it's one of the reasons why you consider growth by acquisition synergies. My client's company did some things with technology that they didn't do. And they saw, we can take what they're doing over here and plug it into all our other manufacturers and markets and all of that and expand their businesses that way. So when they paid well above what I would say is market, it's because of that.
Yeah, because of that strategic benefit. Right. And that makes sense. So not only is that a reason for them to pay more, but also that's a way they're adding value to their entire, portfolio group and is not just a multiple arbitrage play. So that's smart.
Yeah, it's 2 + 2 = 22.
Yeah, exactly. Any other trends that come to mind?
There was predictions starting in 2007 or 8 that you may recall about this great big wave or tsunami or explosion of businesses for sale because of age, and it just never happened.
Exactly.
It stalled out. Basically, the Great Recession started it, and then people got back on their feet. And I like to say that in around 2019 or into 20, before COVID hit, if you ask most business owners, how did you do during the recession? They would say, recession? What recession? Memories are short.
Yeah.
But it just was steady and steadier. There are always a lot of buyers.
Yeah.
My first years in this business, I saw the statistic, 90% of individuals who say they will buy a business never do.
Yes.
A good friend who's a banker says, yeah, that's low. You're seeing more of small in groups that some even call them micro PE, where they're not doing a fund, but they have money or they know where to get the money.
Yeah.
And they're in it for the long haul, not to buy and flip 5 to 7 years later. And there's some pretty smart people doing that don't want to be tied to a fund. Maybe they have a family office. Maybe they have investors that they know will do things, but they just don't want to raise a fund that has all its limitations. And then they don't have the same level of management fees either.
So maybe my last question before I go to my final two, I'm just curious, especially somebody who's brought one of his daughters into the business, right? One of the things that companies do have a choice on is whether they sell externally or whether they do internal succession, right? And in certain industries, there's, it leans, heavily one way or another. Some of it depends upon multiples and all that kind of stuff. Some of it depends upon the individual owner. Any thoughts on, on that sort of decision on when it's appropriate to sell externally or what kind of businesses are appropriate for internal succession? And I'm not making this. I don't know whether, your daughter's involved and is going to take over eventually or what, but it does trigger that question for me on internal versus external succession.
It's a good question. And whether it's a family or management, I have an old article, and I can't remember where it exactly came from. Could be the Wall Street Journal, and some about 15% of businesses make it to the 3rd generation. And a lot of people say that sounds high.
Right.
I have a friend, he's, I think, 4th generation. I know a couple of people that are 3rd, 2nd, et cetera. But it has to be right. It has to be a good fit skill-wise. And depending on the size of the business and how you structure the deal, the mom or dad or mom and dad selling it often need the value of their business for the next great adventure in life, whether it's retirement or something else. And the kids or managers better be willing and able to pay that. We put in a succession plan a couple of years ago for a construction company, which they're pretty common in construction companies because a lot of people don't want to buy them. But I helped them structure the plan, put in the formulas, worked with the accountant, worked with the attorney, They now have a plan. They brought in at first, they had hired someone who wanted some ownership, and he was a very good employee. And he bought in, the first trigger was 12% right away, 13% the next year, pay for it with his bonuses. But now they have a plan and a formula for others coming in, because there were 3 owners, all in the same age range. I'd known one of them for 20 years. And we first sat down together and they said, yeah, we'd all like to be out of here in 2 years. And I just said, that ain't going to happen.
Right.
Not if you're going to get value for the business.
Right.
So, but make sure the kids or the managers are going to pay. And pay. And I worked on one many years ago. Give the very short version of the story, but the bottom line is they brought the kid in, they made him earn his way up the ranks, gave him 10%, and then when they were ready to step back and move to, say, chairman of the board position, he bought the other 90% on a long-term note and annuity for them. Because by then they knew he could run it.
Yeah, love it. Love it. So if people want to find out more about your services, your books, all that kind of stuff, where should they go?
Well, my books are available on Amazon. A website is nokomisadvisory.com, NOKOMIS advisory.com. And there's a contact us form and a phone number on there.
Awesome. John, my final question of the podcast is always about my highest value in life, which is freedom. And for me, that means everything from freedom from all people around the world, from oppression to why I've been an entrepreneur and haven't had a boss for decades. What does freedom mean to you, and how does it impact your life and business?
Well, it's a really good question. And I've listened to your podcast, so I knew it was coming. Freedom to me is, on a daily, weekly basis, being able to do things when I want. I ran errands a couple of days ago. We're in the middle of a project at home, and I had to go pick up something. Ran it during the middle of the day. But no one cares if last night my wife had an engagement. I was at my computer for a while catching up on stuff. No one cares whether you do it at 9 o'clock or 3 o'clock or Saturday or whatever. That's freedom on one source. It's also freedom in the, obviously we have the freedom that we're in a country where we are basically have all of us, we have a lot of freedom, as much as anywhere in the world. And as much as some people will complain and about any little thing, we have a lot of freedom. We can go here, we can go there, we can do what we want, pretty much say what we want. But for me, having my own business like this has given me the freedom. I'm very active with my Rotary Club, and every year we do a project. I'll be gone 2 weeks in February. We go from the Seattle area to Antigua and Barbuda in the Caribbean. I think there's 25 of us going, including 14 or 15 high school students. I work with the local school one of the local school districts TEP program. They teach Cisco networking. We shipped down last week 1,500 refurbished laptop computers, dozens and dozens of projectors, Wi-Fi gears, other stuff for schools. The students will set up Wi-Fi networks in the schools and distribute the computers. We've been doing it for many years. And it's been very rewarding. And it's funny, we've noticed how we've gone there, different, just like anywhere else, Corey, different schools. We come back a year later and it's like, well, these 3 didn't turn on right, so they're over in the corner. Other schools, everything's working perfectly because they took care of them. But our kids that go get as much benefit as the students and teachers in Antigua.
Love that.
They get hosted by local families, so they get a different culture. They may be eating fish and spinach for breakfast, the English breakfast. Antigua's a British Commonwealth country.
Yeah, love it. Love it. Love that you give that experience. And yeah, that's part of it for a number of people is, right, that freedom to have time to give back and make a difference and have an impact.
Yeah.
Awesome. John Martinka, thanks for being such a great guest on the Deal Quest podcast.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. It was a good conversation, Corey.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of Deal Quest, where we help you understand how deal-driven growth can be your ticket to freedom. If you are interested in finding out more about my law firm, the services we provide to entrepreneurial and growing companies across industries all over the country, and my partner Brian Megan and I, and my amazing team, just head over to kupferlaw.com. That's kupferlaw.com. And if you want to follow more of my content, head over to my LinkedIn page where I post regularly. I'm Corey Kupfer. Until next week, wishing you the freedom and financial prosperity that I know your Deal Quest will bring.